Hello everyone. I'm so excited to meet you again with another interesting video. In this video, we're going to learn how to create burn up and burn down charts and how to use them to track the performance of the project. In Agile project management, we create two types of charts. The first one is the burn up chart, another one is burn down chart to track the schedule performance of the project. And we measure the schedule performance of the project at two levels. The first level is at the release level, that is for the entire project duration. We measure how things are going. Are we performing ahead of the schedule or behind the schedule or on track? Likewise, we also measure the performance of the project at iteration level. We call the burn up and burn down charts we create to measure the performance of the project at iteration level as iteration burn up and burn down charts. So in this video, I'm going to use Excel spreadsheet to create tables and show you how to plot them into the burn up and burn down charts. So let's get started with the video. We'll start the discussion with a simple question: why we have two charts, the burn up and burn down chart? Well, it's all about preferences. You need to know when to use which chart. You can either use a burn up chart or a burn down chart. They are pretty much same, but it's all about preferences. To make you to understand when to use a burn up and a burn down chart, let's see an example. Let's say you're watching a cricket match. The target score is 320 runs. So your country is chasing this score. If you score more than this run or equal to this run, you win the match. Now the current score is 240 runs. Okay, so this is the current run and this is the target. Now you know that the target is 320 and the current run is 240. How much runs so far we have scored against the target? So that's one way to represent the progress, how much progress your team has made. Now there's another way to represent the progress, that is, we need 80 more runs to win, isn't it? So this is another way to show the progress. So this is about how much more work we had to accomplish, how much pending work we have in the list, okay, or how much more work is yet to be accomplished. So if you want to represent the schedule progress this way, you can use the burn up chart. If you want to represent the schedule progress this way, you have to go for burn down chart. So burn up chart is all about how much work we have so far accomplished in total, and burn down chart is all about how much work pending for us or work yet to be accomplished. So you have to decide whether you like to see the work progress this way or this way. Many of the project managers prefer this way, how much more work yet to be accomplished, and that's why burn down charts are more preferred over burn up charts, but they do the same thing. So it's up to us to decide whether you want to use a burn up chart or burn down chart. Okay. Now let's go to the spreadsheet and understand what is meant by a release, burn up and burn down charts. Well, release, burn up and burn down charts are used to measure the schedule performance of the entire project. So we create them to track how things are going in terms of schedule for the entire project, not just focusing on a sprint or iteration. That is about iteration, burn up and burn down charts. Okay. Now to prepare a release, burn up or burn down chart, first we need three basic inputs. The first one is how much amount of work we have in the product backlog in terms of story points or idle days. Second, we need to know how much is your team velocity, that is, again, will be in idle days or in story points. Then we have to take these two numbers, the total amount of work we have in the product backlog. In this case, we're assuming we have 600 story points amount of work in the product backlog, and the team velocity is 25. So if you divide 600 story points divided by 25, you find out we need 24 iterations, right? Simple math. All right. Now that's about the number of iterations. If you want to know how to estimate the total amount of work in a product backlog using story points and team velocity, and how to do iteration release planning, I have made 3 different videos for you. The links for these videos are in the description, so please check them out. Okay, now we found that we need 24 iterations in this project to complete all the work we have in the product backlog. Okay, we'll start with the burnout chart table. So here we have how much work we have in the product backlog. That's in this column. You see that till some point we had only 500 story points amount of work, and then because of some reason, either the scope, new features and functionalities has been added to the product, or we did re-estimation of the story points and we increased the sizes of the features, whatever it could be. Now we have more work. So from 500, the total work got changed to 600 by 12th iteration. Okay, so that's about the amount of work column. So the highest amount of work we have in the product backlog is 600, and here we have the iteration column. Iteration means number of iterations we're going to run in the project. So we found that we need 24 iterations. So we start with 0 and go till 24, and in each iteration we're going to complete 25 story points amount of work. All right, so you see this column is very important. So to plot the burnup or the burndown chart, we need to create these 2 columns, the idle progress and the actual progress. So let's first talk about how we create this idle progress column. This is a cumulative value of how much work we have completed by end of nth iteration. For example, someone asks you, hey buddy, how much work you guys will complete? Because this is about the plan, idle progress, will complete by end of 9th iteration. So in every iteration, we're going to complete 25 story points amount of work. So we have to add them up. For example, by end of first iteration, we'll complete 25 story points amount of work. And in second iteration, we will complete another 25. So 25 plus 25, you get 50. And in third iteration, by end of third iteration, we'll complete another 25. So 25 plus already completed work is 50. So 25 plus 50, we get 75. So this is about the cumulative value. So someone asks you by end of 13th iteration, how much work you guys will complete based on your team's velocity. So 13 times of 25 story points, that will be 325. Okay, that's about this column. Now this is our expectation, idle progress. Now let's talk about the actual progress. In this project, so far we have completed 16 iteration, and so you don't find any entries for 17th to 24th iteration. Okay, so we are in the middle of the project. So we're done with 16 iterations, and here we have the actual velocity column. In the first iteration, we completed 17 story points amount of work. The expectation is 25, but we did 17. And in the next iteration, we completed another 15 story points. Again, we are supposed to complete 25, but we did only 15. Okay, so like this things are going, and here in this column we are creating the cumulative value. So first iteration 17, so we put 17 here. In the next iteration we completed another 15, so 17 plus 15 we get 32. And in the third iteration 32 plus another 13, so we get 45, and so on. And therefore if you add up these numbers, we found that by end of 16th iteration, we completed 445 story points amount of work. So you see in the middle things were getting better. So we completed 27, 30, 49, 50. So the team has achieved double the amount of work than their average velocity. Okay. All right. So we have the total cumulative value of the actual work progress in this column. Now we're going to use these 2 columns to plot this graph, this chart. So you could see the blue line. Blue line is the idle progress. So it's very straight for a very obvious reason, because This is our expectation. By end of every iteration, we're going to complete 25 story points. That's our expectation, theoretical stuff. So this line is very straight. So let's say if we go to 12th iteration, by end of 12th iteration, our expectation is we want to complete 300 story points amount of work. But how much we actually completed, you have to go to this, the orange line, 372. Okay, we completed more than what is expected. If you look at the beginning, in the initial iterations, maybe if you take the third iteration, well, we are expected to complete 75 story points amount of work by end of third iteration, and we completed only 45. Well, that's not good. Okay, so you can come here, by end of third iteration, we're expected to complete 75, but we completed only 45. By end of 16th iteration, we're expected to complete 400, but we completed more than what is expected, 445. So this means we are ahead of the schedule. So how to infer whether we are ahead of the schedule or behind the schedule from a Release Burnup Chart? Well, you have to first look at the reference line, that is a target line. This is our expected performance, schedule performance. And then you have to see the actual line. If the actual line is below the reference line, the expectation line or the target line, this means we are behind the schedule. This is only applicable for a burnup chart. In a burndown chart, it's the opposite. Okay, we'll discuss it in some time. So in a burnup chart, if the actual line is below the reference line or expectation line, then we are behind the schedule. And if the actual line is above the expectation line or the target line, then we are ahead of the schedule. So the rule of thumb is, in the burn up chart, if the actual line is up above the reference line, everything is great. You are performing more than what is expected. Clear? So up is good. So in a burn up chart, if the actual line is up above the reference line, you are ahead of the schedule. If they are overlapping, falling on each other, this means you are on schedule. If the actual line is below the reference line, then you are behind the schedule. Okay, so that's about how to infer the chart and to understand the schedule performance of your project. Now, how about this line, this green line? Well, this green line is about how much work in total we have in the product backlog. Always remember, burnup chart is about knowing how much work we have so far accomplished and what is the target. So from this actual line, you can understand how much work so far we have achieved and what is the total target. If you look at this picture, you see this is about the burnup chart. Now we are talking about the target. So you always need to maintain the target so that people can infer how much this means. We have completed 240 story points. That means how much progress. I want to know the total target value. And that's why we need to always maintain the total amount of work we have in the product backlog inside the burnup chart. Okay, you could see that till iteration 11, we had 500 story points amount of work. After iteration 11, in 12th iteration, the work got increased from 500 to 600. So you can always see how much work in total we have in the product backlog and how much work we have so far accomplished and we are in which iteration. So that's about a Release Burnup Chart. Okay, now let's talk about the Release Burndown Chart. It's the same, but we just sort these two columns, the idle progress and the actual progress column, in descending order. Here you could see the values are in ascending order. We're gonna sort them in descending order and replot the graph. Okay, the same, we know that in total we have 500 story points amount of work and we're gonna run in total 20 iterations because our team velocity is 25. So we have 20 iterations in this project. In each iteration we're going to complete 25 story points, but instead of starting from value 0, in the previous case you see we started with value 0, then we added 25 each time. By end of every iteration, we add another 25. But in this case, we're going to start with the total value, 500, and we decrement 25 from the total value each time by end of each iteration. So we first have 500, that's the total amount of work. Then we subtracted 25 from it by end of first iteration. So why we do this? Because we want to know how much work left out in the project. That's about a burn down chart. Here we don't want to know how much work we have accomplished so far. We want to know how much work is left out in the product backlog. So in the first iteration, you're going to complete 25 story points amount of work. So we subtract 25 from 500, you get 475. And in the by end of second iteration, we're going to complete another 25. So we subtract 25 from 475, you get 450. So like this, by every iteration, we will decrement 25 story points amount of work from the total amount remaining in the product backlog, remaining work left out in the product backlog. So if you go like this, by 19th iteration, you have only 25, and by 20th iteration, you will burn down that as well. So you get 0. So this is the same list number sequence you have in this column, but the numbers are sorted in descending order, not in ascending order. Okay, so here we start from 0 and go to the maximum value 600. In this case, we start from the maximum value 500 and go to 0 in steps of 25 story points. Now we do the same with the actual. So here we have the same scenario, how much work we actually complete per iteration, and we're going to subtract that from the total work. Okay, we don't start from 0, we start from 500. So we start with 500, then we subtract 15 story points from it. By end of first iteration, you get 485. Then the second iteration, we completed another 10 story points. So we subtract 10 from 485, you get 475, and so on. So in this project, we have so far completed 16 iterations, and we have burned down so much of work so that we have only 75 story points left out in the project. So we're going to plot these two columns as a graph. You could see the blue line, which indicates the target, the expected schedule performance of the project. And this column is represented by this orange color graph, and this is our actual. Now you could see that by end of 16th iteration, we are supposed to left out with only 100 story points amount of work, but we have completed so much of work so that we have only 75 story points amount of work in the product backlog. So the expectation is you should have only 100, but we have even lesser than that, that is 75. So what is your opinion? Are we doing ahead of the schedule or behind the schedule? Indeed, ahead of the schedule. You are supposed to have only 100 story points left out in the product backlog by end of 16th iteration, but you have only 75 left out in the product backlog. This means you and your team members are doing amazing work. You guys are ahead of the schedule. Now in the Burndown chart, it's very apparent that if the actual is beneath or below the reference or target line, we say the schedule is doing well. The project is doing good in terms of schedule. So it's the opposite of the burn up chart. In a burn down chart, the actual line being below the reference line is a good. So here, because it's a burn down chart, down is good. If the actual line is down the target line, then the project is doing ahead of the schedule. If you have the actual line above the reference line, this means the project is behind the schedule. Okay, for example, if you take iteration 8, by end of iteration 8, we are supposed to have only 300 story points left out in the product backlog. But if you look at that, how much work so far we have burned down and how much work left out in the product backlog, we have 372. So 300 is what we expect to be left out in the product backlog, but we have more than that, 372. So this means we are behind the schedule. So that's how we infer a burn down chart and find out whether we are ahead of the schedule or behind the schedule. Okay, if the points are overlapping, if the actual and the target lines are falling on each other, this means your project is on schedule. Okay, that's about the burn up and burn down charts. I hope you are clear with this. Now we're going to talk about the sprint burn up and burn down charts. A sprint burn up and burn down charts are same as the release burn up and burn down charts. The only difference is the release burn up and burn down charts are used to measure the or track the entire project schedule performance. The total duration of the project will be considered for evaluating the burn up and burn down charts or preparing the burn up and burn down charts. Well, you can track the performance of iterations. So within an iteration, how things are going. Are we ahead of the schedule or behind the schedule? So to do that, we prepare sprint or iteration burn up and burn down charts. Now, unlike the release burn up and burn down charts where we use story points or idle days, here we use effort hours, estimated effort hours of the tasks, because within an iteration we will be having tasks, and tasks need to be estimated using absolute numbers. We have to use absolute estimation techniques, not relative estimation techniques. So therefore, all the tasks inside the sprint backlog will be estimated in terms of effort hours or effort days. So here we are done with the sprint planning, and we have a set of tasks with us, task 1 to task 16, and here we have the estimated hours of each task. For example, if we take task 1, it is estimated to take 8 hours of duration. Okay, now here we have the days in a sprint. Assume that you are following 2 weeks sprint duration in your project. Typically we can choose any duration between 1 week to 4 weeks duration, but the most preferred duration, sprint duration, is of 2 weeks duration. So this means you have technically 10 working days inside each iteration or sprint, because we don't work on Saturdays and Sundays. So if you take 2 weeks sprint, we have 10 working days inside it. So I have mentioned those 10 working days here. So here we won't create the burn up and burn down charts using iterations. We are talking about what's going on within an iteration or a sprint. Therefore, we have to switch to days, not iterations in the x-axis. And here the total amount of work we have to perform in this particular iteration or sprint is 120. So how we found this? We added up these numbers and we found that we have in total 120 hours of estimated hours of work inside this sprint. We have to perform this much amount of work inside this sprint. So we're going to track how much hours of effort team members spent to do the planned work, tasks or activities inside the sprint. So first day we tracked, we didn't spend any effort on 0th day. Okay, we didn't spend any effort on 0th day. This means I added 0th day to show you day 1, how much progress we made on day 1. This means day 0 need to be treated as beginning of the sprint, day 1 morning. Okay, so by end of day 1, the team members have completed 3 hours of work in task 6 and 1 hour of work in task 9. That's it. So if you add up these numbers, you got 4. So 4 hours of work has been performed on day 1. How about day 2? So we have some entries here, 3 and 3 and 1, and we got 7. So the total value is 7. Okay, so likewise things are going. So if you take add up these numbers from here to here, you could find that on 5th day we have done with all the estimated efforts planned for this task. So we complete, this means the team members have completed task 1 on day 5. Okay, sometimes in the middle of the sprint we will change these numbers. We might re-estimate this task and the numbers might go up or go down. For example, 15 might become 20, or 20 or 15 might become 12. All these things are possible. We might identify a new task and we add it into the list. All right, but we always find out in total how much amount of work we have in the sprint backlog in terms of effort hours. Okay, and we track how much work we accomplished every day, and we want to add up those numbers to find out the cumulative value of work performed on each day of the sprint. All right, now this is the amount of work we done, and we're going to go for the cumulative value. So we go for adding up this number. So first day 4, then we have 0, then 4, then 7, then 13, then 30, and so on. So I'm going to plot that in this chart. You could see this value as a blue line in the chart. You could see here, for example, day 5, how much work we have done, 26. So let's see, it's 26 effort hours of work has been accomplished. On day 7, 72. So we are in the middle of the sprint. We have 3 more days to complete this sprint. Now you see this orange line. This indicates the expected performance. It's optional. This orange line and this total work we have in the sprint backlog are optional. Even these are optional in the previous cases, that is in the Release Burnup and Burndown Charts. You may or may not need them, but what you need is this one, okay, the blue line. All right, but it's a good practice to use these 2 lines, the orange line and the gray line, to capture the reference, the target, so that you can compare the actual with them to infer how things are going in your project. So the orange line is the ideal performance expected from the team. So let's say you have 120 hours of work in the sprint backlog, and you have 10 days. So every day we're going to complete 12 hours of work. So 12, 24, 36, 96, 108, and 120. So I'm going to use this number to plot this line, the orange line. Now you can see that, well, it's a burnup chart. If the actual is below the reference or target line, this means we are behind the schedule. Do you agree? If this line is above the target line, if the actual line is above the target line, that is the blue line is above the orange line, it's a good sign. You and your team members are ahead of the schedule. Okay, so that's about Sprint Burnup Chart. Now let me show you a Sprint Burndown Chart. Again, this one is about the total amount of effort, total amount of work we target to complete in this iteration, and the unit is effort hours. So we have in total 120 effort hours of work, and so far we have completed 72 effort hours of work. Okay, now let's see the Sprint Burndown Chart. It's the same but the opposite. So here we won't start with 0. We will take the full estimated numbers of each task on day 0, and we don't put how much amount of effort we spent or completed. Instead, subtract that number from the total effort. For example, on day 1, the team members have completed 3 hours of effort meant for task 1. So we're going to subtract 3 hours from 8, so we get 5. Okay, so we always need to think about how much effort left out when you want to plot a burn down chart. So we take the total value and subtract how much effort so far we have spent or accomplished. On day 3, we complete another 3 hours of effort. So 5 minus another 3, we get 2. On day 4, we completed this task. That is, we have spent the remaining 2 hours. So you got 0 here. So like this, we created the number sequence for all the other tasks inside the sprint backlog, which need to be done in this sprint. and we added up the total value on each day, and we have them here. Okay, now you're gonna plot these numbers as a blue line to indicate the actual performance of the project, that is actual work so far accomplished. That is, we are on day 6 of the sprint. We have completed 55 effort hours of work, and the expectation is we should have left out with 40 hours. So here the blue line talks about how much amount of work left out in the sprint. Okay, so we are left out with 55. Remember, Burndown chart is all about how much work left out, pending work. So we are left out with 55 hours of work, and how much is supposed to be there? Only 40. So we are having more work in the sprint backlog. This means we are behind the schedule. Always remember, in the Burndown chart, if the actual line is below the target line, it's a good indication. Alright, so that's about how to plot a sprint burndown and burnup charts. I hope you liked this video. With this, we are done with the discussion. In this video, we learned about the usage of burnup and burndown charts, how to create a release burnup and burndown chart, and a sprint or iteration burnup and burndown chart. If you find this video really useful, give me a thumbs up and share this with others. Also, you can subscribe to my channel, because I regularly come up with a lot of useful project management videos, so you can learn a lot about project management by subscribing to my channel. And if you plan to take any project management certification training, you can contact us. I've provided the link for our PMP bootcamp registration in the description. You can register and take the first 10 hours of the training for no cost. And if you like the training, you can pay the training fee and continue with us. I will meet you again with another interesting video. Till then, take care.